Welcome to Radio News Hub's News Chats. It is the 1st of July 2020. I brought together three guests to talk about a topical issue in the news. Today it's really one word, one city in the UK, Leicester, which we heard on Monday would be going into a local lockdown, the first in the UK after a spike in coronavirus cases. So I brought together three different guests. We have Chris Hobson from the East Midlands Chamber of Commerce. We have Dave Stokes, who's the chair of the Leicestershire Police Federation. And we have Regina Tóth, who is a student in Leicester is it De Montfort University?
Yes, it is.
So yeah, I've brought you all together to talk about the situation in Leicester this morning, this week. Regina, I'd like to start with you. What's it like in the city at the moment? What's kind of the feeling going around the city?
I think it's part of a mix of the people that are refusing the second lockdown, and they're like, no, we are not going home. We don't care. We are immune to this virus. And unfortunately, there is quite a few people that I've seen yesterday. And then there is obviously the other part, the people who are actually still very much afraid of the virus, still very much, if they need to go out, they're going out with a mask on. They are putting gloves on, they are sanitizing. So it's kind of a mix of that. And right now I feel like it is colliding. And I hope that most people are slowly going to be accepting that this lockdown is for the best and we need to follow it. But unfortunately, I still see people outside not really caring too much about it.
Is it, I know you work in the city. What's it been like with work at the moment? Because obviously, I mean, you've told me earlier that you work at a non-essential business, which presumably only just reopened. What's it like going back and then now being told you're not able to work anymore?
So I think we've been back at work for about 2 weeks-ish. And the business where I work at, only 75% of the business only came back initially. And it was going to be this week that the whole team got back. So obviously for me, I've worked 2 weeks. It feels a bit like it's a very quick change. But for the people that only came back on Monday to be told that they can't come to work from Wednesday onwards, it must be a big disappointment and very confusing situation. Yesterday, we were asked to come in without the store opening just to finish up everything, because obviously on Monday, they closed the store without thinking that there would be no business and no customers from the next day onwards. So we had some bits and bobs to do, but they were very strict on not opening the store. They were very strict on still keeping the social distancing, asking us to put on masks and gloves to do anything. And obviously from today onwards, nobody's in store. So nobody can even come in, and they are keeping in contact over phone, over email, over text messages. So they were very clear on keeping in with the government's guidelines.
Dave, your members will be sort of responsible for policing this local lockdown. I wanted to ask you when you first heard that this lockdown was going to be brought in, because there seems to have been a delay between when the government knew about the upsurge in cases and when they brought in the actual measures. So when did you hear, and what was your reaction?
So originally it was the same time as members of the public, and it was through national media platforms. In terms of policing itself, it was, so all of the planning in terms of our members, our frontline staff, has been in the making, because we knew nationally the consequence of the lockdown being removed or being reduced meant that there would be lots of footfall of traffic, pedestrian traffic, people going out, socialising, etc. So in terms of policing, there was always a policing plan. Clearly, what changed was the announcement that there was an issue in terms of an increase of the virus within Leicester, and then we have then been waiting for just the strategy to be set by the Home Office, along with any kind of legislative powers that we're going to use in terms of policing. I think it's really important to understand, because we've just heard it there, when you listen to somebody talk about the impact on them, it's understanding that the policing is done with consent and consent of the public. So this journey we go through is with public and with public opinion supporting the public. So when we talk about enforcement and how we're going to police it, This is all about working with the public, working with businesses and our partners, so that it's education as opposed to enforcement. Now, will there be some enforcement at the end of it if we've got people that are ignoring advice? Then possibly, but that would be right down at the end of the tactics that are used by police officers.
Is it going to be a tough one to police? Because I've seen the map that has been drawn out of sort of the local lockdown area. It looks like some of the lines have been drawn across roads. So one side of the road will be in the lockdown, one side of the road won't be. Does it present an additional challenge when it's only one part of the entire force area that you're responsible for that's in this lockdown situation?
I don't want to sound like I'm giving a politician's answer. If I was to say this to you, COVID has presented challenges from day one, and it really has in terms of policing. And you see that in terms of fatigue, officers working long hours, managers within policing working long hours, even our support staff, the control room staff, everyone in terms of policing, very, very similar to the NHS. We have for the last couple of months been tested. I think moving forward and over the next few days, yes, it will bring some challenges, and it's unprecedented times. But those challenges, if we've got the right numbers, because we'd already got the planning in place over the next 4 days, it will make it will offer some form of relief. I think the challenges will come back with the actual public engagement, and the example that you give, if you live on one side of the line, or if you're socialising on one side of the line, it is just making sure that we are smart with our messages to the public, and we're smart around actually policing. It's difficult because I wouldn't use the word policing that line, but it's just making sure that if you do feature as part of the lockdown in a particular area, that's what the education, that's where the education message should be. But it works both ways. If you're on the line where the lockdown has been reduced, it's also making sure that you understand there will be parts of Leicestershire that we would be saying to you that's not a part of Leicestershire we would like you to visit.
Sure. Chris, I wanted to ask you a bit about the picture for businesses, because it's already been an extremely tough time, an unprecedented time for many businesses, especially in retail and in hospitality, cafes, restaurants, etc. To be told that you can reopen and then a few days later to be told you have to shut again for a minimum of 2 weeks, that must be just incredibly tough for some of your members.
Really tough. And I suppose to explain why it's tough. So particularly for smaller businesses, their lifeblood comes, comes in their cash flow, and the amount of money that they have coming in and money going out. And cash flow over the last few months has been horrendous. For some, it's just money in has been stopped. There have been schemes and ways of reducing the money going out, whether it's saving on utility costs or saving on staffing costs because of furlough, but you're still incurring costs just by virtue of being there. The government, when the lockdown was national, introduced a number of schemes for businesses. There was a very effective grant scheme at a local level, and there are various debt schemes as well, so loan schemes, and they've been helpful. But what they did is they kept many businesses afloat at a time when otherwise they would have had to seriously consider their future. And now that the lockdown is going to be extended, lots of these businesses are going to be looking again, and many of them will need further support. And one of the things that we're saying to government is, there's a national lockdown, we had some national business support schemes and they worked well. We have a local lockdown now, we need additional local business support schemes, ideally in the form of grants, because businesses have taken on a lot of debt which will have to be paid back at some point. And you don't want to just store a problem up for 12 months time. But without it, many of them are going to really struggle, and that's a really sad thing to say, but it's also true, unfortunately. And remember, businesses don't sit apart from the wider community. They're part of the community. They employ local people. They serve local people. They're run by local people, and they're going to need our support.
Presumably, there are pubs and restaurants and cafes that have bought up quite a lot of stock in the anticipation that they're going to reopen on Saturday, that are now facing having all of that money and stock go to waste.
Yeah, I was talking to someone in the pub trade who spent £8,000 getting stock in that's not going to keep for longer than a couple of weeks. Someone else that runs a bakery cake making shop, and obviously has bought lots of dairy and material, the raw materials that need to go into her products. And yeah, that's a cost that they're not going to be able. Their insurance won't cover it. From the start, businesses have had real issues with how what insurers will and won't cover, and I appreciate it's difficult for insurers as well. So yeah, that they're going to really struggle without additional support, financial support from whether it's from central government coming via local or whatever. But one of the things that we don't want to happen in terms of economic recovery. So some good news, things are around the wider country and the wider patch that my Chamber of Commerce covers. Things are starting to pick up and move again. What you don't want is a two-tier recovery where Leicester and the surrounding area gets held back while the rest of the country progresses, and then you end up with a massive disadvantage. You create a big problem in Leicester that's not of its own doing at all, and that's something we need to avoid.
And presumably, we know that it's going to be probably at least another 2 weeks of this lockdown. That's yet more uncertainty for businesses who are already probably struggling to plan for the future, given the situation we're in.
It is, yeah. I think actually so they were talking about at least 2 weeks. I think the latest news I saw was that it's going to be reviewed on the 18th of July, which is close to 3 weeks actually. That wasn't announced at the time. And uncertainty is the word. And uncertainty kills confidence, and it kills consumer confidence, and ultimately it can seriously kind of undermine businesses. So one of the things that's going to be really important for everyone is real clarity of communication in terms of what's going to happen, how it's when's it going to happen. I don't know. I've not seen anything yet other than it's going to be reviewed now on the 18th of July that says what the testers will be for coming out of lockdown. How will we know when it's okay to come out of this phase? It's not been. I don't think that's been explained. Is there a target number we're after? It's been really confusing, and what we've heard from everyone so far is yesterday there was real confusion amongst members of the public, amongst businesses, amongst organisations that serve the city and the surrounding area around what is and isn't okay to do.
Regina, do you feel like you're a bit in limbo with all this uncertainty going around about the lockdown? And I know you're a student, soon to be a graduate. There's a lot of uncertainty for the jobs market as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we just think about the fact that I need to be moving out of my accommodation in August, and I need to find a new place to live before that without possibly being able to go and see the flat where I'm going to be moving in. That's just one part. But then obviously there is a job market where nobody wants to hire someone. Now I'm from Leicester, so people probably won't want to hire me even more because I'm coming from Leicester. So they don't want me to in any way carry something over. Hopefully that's not going to be an issue, obviously. But yeah, definitely there's so much uncertainty, and it's quite scary, to be honest. Because as a recent graduate, I think life is just scary in general, but in like today's climate and in this situation, there's just not only your normal graduate confusion going about, but the confusion of everybody around you, because obviously people don't know what's going to happen. As you've mentioned, that businesses don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if they're going to need any more people, or if they're going to have to get rid and make redundant their own existing employees. So it is a very scary situation to be a graduate right now.
And we see quite big jobless figures, every day, big, job cuts. We've had Airbus announce big job cuts, the aerospace firm. We had the company that owns Upper Crust, which is a sort of retailer at stations and airports, announced 5,000 job cuts, which is an eye-watering figure. That must be a big worry, that companies are cutting back at the exact time you want to enter the jobs market.
Yeah, it is very scary. And obviously, I currently have a part-time job that I had with my studies. It's not the job in my profession, and it's not the job that I want to carry on having. And I am fortunate enough that my company is big enough that they sort of promise that they're not going to make anyone redundant. But at the same time, it is a worry in everyone's mind. It's kind of a worry like, oh, if my contract ends, will they renew it? because that's a way to kind of cut back on people without making them redundant at a certain time, is kind of just wait until their contract ends and then let them go gently. It's definitely a big worry of everyone, I think, that we understand that the businesses are losing money, because really, as you said, there is so many businesses investing money in making their store COVID-19 proof. Because when we went back, there was a lot of stickers on the floor. There was all the government guidelines printed out. They literally spent so much money on making the store safe for customers and for us. But now that we have to close again, and who knows how long, hopefully only for 2-3 weeks, but maybe longer if this second spike doesn't pass, and then all that money is not wasted, but it's not used in the way that they intended it to be used.
Dave, I want to ask you a bit about sort of protecting the officers on Leicestershire Police from coronavirus. What extra measures have they had to take over the past few months to really be mindful of, you know, the infection risk, and when dealing with members of the public? Because obviously you can't be as up close as maybe you once were. You have to be quite mindful about how you police now.
You do, and that's exactly my role, and that is looking after our members. But there is a but, and that is, as police officers, the very nature in what you do. You know, we will have seen NHS staff that are clearly at more risk than the general public, and the police are exactly the same. The very fact that we're policing, it was really interesting there, because when you listen to the comments around businesses, as in business being part of the community, it goes back to that saying that it just fits into British policing, and that is the public are the police are the public. So it's not like we are dealing with a crime; it's dealing with a health crisis. So it's protecting the public, and obviously in protecting the public, doing all that we can for our members, i.e. police officers. Are they exposed to increased risk? Of course they are. But in terms of PPE, officers on the ground, they have got the PPE that they need. In terms of some of what I would call risk mitigation, that has been really, really, really smart. And we've started to do business in policing in very, very different ways. Some of the meetings that we used to have as face to face, making sure that we keep public confidence on our side. But in terms of police officers, you know, what can we actually do to mitigate the risk? And some of it is actually it's been a journey that I think will actually change policing forever, in a positive way. So I guess in a nutshell, the risk towards police officers, yes, it's increased. We're doing all that we can in terms of the Federation and the Chief Officer team in terms of mitigating that risk as much as possible. I'm certainly in a comfortable place that we're doing all we can, accepting that the fact that police officers are every day, in terms of what officers do, is a risky business.
What are you hearing from officers on the ground about how compliant people are with the sort of social distancing regulations and the various things we're being told to obey by the governments? If your officer approaches someone on the street, what's the typical experience? I guess there isn't a typical experience in policing, but you know, what do you hear?
It's incredible. It is good. Clearly, the working with the public is working. You know, if you're stopping, if officers are stopping members of the public, they're on side. It's been education messages. That's not to say that there hasn't been some fixed penalty notices where members of the public have just been, you know, resistant. Literally cars where you've got 4 or 5 occupants that are doing no more than driving for leisure activities. And it's ensuring that our officers are smart in the way that they police. And if you think that message is working, then we just need to go anywhere near the enforcement phase of it. So I think the interaction between the police and the public within Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland up until now has been really, really good. I think that the challenge for us now is to keep that on, keep that momentum going over the next 4 days, and take on board, even during this interview. We know it's going to be difficult. You know, the public is saying it's going to be difficult. It's engaging with the public and policing really, really smart.
Yeah. Chris, I wanted to ask you a bit about, and Regina alluded to it already with some of the stuff she's seen at our work. Businesses having to take off the additional costs of making their premises COVID secure, whatever that term means in the context of the business, or whether it means plastic screens, or whether it means signage, that sort of thing. Because that's an additional burden businesses have to bear at this quite difficult time. What are you hearing from people about that?
Yeah, you're right. It's a cost, and it's right that they do that, because businesses want to be able to welcome back staff and customers and suppliers, and as safely as they can. So yeah, the businesses are having to make these investments. Interestingly, a couple of weeks ago, the price of Perspex nationally leapt up by 30% because everyone was buying these Perspex screens. What'll be interesting, I think, is seeing how much of it becomes a permanent fixture of doing business, and how much of it is about making people secure for the here and now. And I think in the longer term, it'll be interesting to think about how the ways of working in certain sectors and industries might change, because similar to what was just been saying about the police force, there have been some positive lessons learned as well in terms of how people can work and what we are able to achieve. I live in Leicester, I work in Leicester, and I've been working from home for the past 3 months, and that's been seamless enough. So there's been an upfront cost that businesses have had to absorb, and that's where, to come back to my earlier point, I think additional finance, nothing we're calling for is a business adaptation and funds to be made available, is important. But I also think there are lessons that businesses can learn around how they deliver whatever it is they deliver, whether it's a product or a service and whatever, in a more sustainable way in the future. And I said there's one other thing that I wanted to pick up on, if I may. I think that's what Regina was saying around employment and employment numbers. And I think there's a real challenge for us, for the city, but for the whole country, to think about how it supports people out of the workforce now, and how it's particularly younger people out of the workforce, and the money available for skills and training. We need to, as we've never got it right as a country. It's always been the hobby horse of one politician or another, and now more than ever, we really need to get that right, because there's a big challenge, I think, in the here and now and in the immediate years, about how we ensure that we have jobs that are fit for the future and sustainable, and that's something that I think isn't being spoken about enough.
Yeah, and do you think the sort of architecture or the setup of businesses in Leicester could change? Because a lot of people have discovered during lockdown that they can work perfectly effectively from home, and they don't necessarily need to commute to a city centre office in order to do the work they do.
I think potentially yes. I think it's more than just Leicester, but I think yes. I think we work with our members, talk to our members all the time, and I know others do likewise. And very few businesses, I think, feel that they will return to working 100% how they used to work before lockdown in the future. That will obviously change depending on sectors, so very different for a professional services firm to, say, a company that sells cookies in High Cross, for example. But I think that people will look at how they work, and that has implications for transport in the city. It has implications for how the city is designed. It has implications for how things are policed. It has implications for everything. Really. It's really interesting. And if it wasn't such a difficult, desperate time for so many people, it would be interesting to look at how trends that perhaps in the economy were happening anyway, but maybe quite slowly, have been sped up over the past 3 months, when things that people always said that could never be done, that's too difficult, all of a sudden have been forced upon us. And in 10 years' time, it'll be interesting to look back and see that. But unfortunately, in the here and now, there's some very difficult decisions being faced by individuals, by police, and by businesses, and by other services that to support communities in and around Leicester.
Regina, I wanted to ask you, pick up on a point Chris made about sort of the future of young people in this country and elsewhere. What would help you at the moment? You're about to enter the workforce, you're going to be a graduate. What would really help at this point to get a career started for you?
It would be really good to kind of have companies actively accepting people that are coming out of university right now, because I just feel like all the job openings that I see, obviously there is far fewer than it would be normal because people don't need so many new employees, but it would be really nice to have that sort of acknowledgement that we know you don't have experience, but it's okay. You know, even if it's sort of an open internship program where they will train you, like a trainee program, something like that. Because I do feel like a lot of people that come out of university right now are going to just be going into businesses that are needing more employees, which is obviously the non-essential shops. And they're just going to get packed in there working jobs that they don't want to do, instead of getting some training, building new skill sets, getting that sort of support from businesses or from the government. I don't really know where that support should come from, or maybe from both. Maybe it could be a mix of both, where the government and the businesses together kind of come up with like a program for graduates or people needing or looking for new jobs right now in this situation, where they say, we could open up some space for you. We could open up, and even if it's not a full-time job, even if it's a part-time or an internship or a traineeship or something that doesn't really pay enough for you to have a living by, but it's something, a step up, it's just a foot in the door, so that when the situation clears up and there is more job openings happening, then we will have that extra experience or that something under our belt, so that we can stand out, or just build some more confidence for recent graduates to be able to go to that interview, to be able to write a motivational letter and you know, be the best and actually get a job like that. Because that's something that you need a lot of experience to build up that confidence and that sort of practice of knowing how to apply for a job. And right now, because there is not so many jobs to apply for, I feel like a lot of graduates are sort of getting used to getting a rejection letter and just kind of letting it go, instead of sort of taking the initiative and kind of going back to the HR person that rejected them and say, look, how can I make my application better? Can you give me some feedback? Things like that we need to kind of get into practice with. And we don't do it because we just accept it. Oh yeah, it's COVID time. People are not looking for new employees. People just can't hire us because it's lockdown time. But that's not how it should be. It should be all of us trying to get better and trying to challenge ourselves and develop ourselves, so that when all of this is over, we can get a job. And I think there could be some support, either coming from the universities themselves, or businesses or government, or all of them together, kind of pairing up and saying, we understand the situation is really hard for you, let us help.
Dave, you alluded to something earlier about the way policing is changing in this country. Do you see real opportunities here, you know, from this crisis to really change the way we police, or, you know, improve it, maybe recruit more from different communities and, you know, really improve the police force in this country?
Yeah, definitely. If you to say to me, in terms of the chair of the Federation, what is the best thing that I see on a day-to-day and during COVID, it's been the fact that if I walk through headquarters, there are lots of new staff, new student officers that we've continued to recruit right throughout COVID. Yes, there's been changes in training programs, and some of the points just made there are really, really powerful, because what you can do is look back on yourselves and are we doing exactly what was just described? Well, most definitely in terms of embracing the university and students that are coming out of the university into policing, we're very much on top of our game there. If you look at it in terms of apprentices and looking at the younger community and the value that they can bring into policing, we are very much there, and we've continued to do that during COVID. If you look at some of the Twitter feeds from Leicestershire Police, really, really powerful messages, because policing can't stop. But what COVID-19 did do is made us rethink what are we doing and how we continue to police, but police smart. And like I say, one of the most powerful examples of that is training. Is the fact that 10 years, 11 years of cutbacks within policing, as soon as the tap started to turn back on, it was almost at the very, very same time as COVID came in, and it didn't stop us from recruiting. It didn't stop us from training. So I think they're really interesting points, because it makes me look back at it, and a bit of reflective practices are we doing that in Leicestershire as a police force? And we are, because it's what I see as the chair of the federation that is the most powerful thing in policing within Leicestershire at the moment.
Brilliant. That's about all we have time for today. So thank you all for joining me today. We've had Chris Hobson from the East Midlands Chamber of Commerce. We've had Regina Tóth, who's a student in Leicester, and we've also had Dave Stokes, who's the chair of the Leicestershire Police Federation. Thank you all for joining me on News Chats from Radio News Hub.